My name is Mason Reynolds, and at 34, I thought I finally had my family figured out. After 3 years of avoiding home for Christmas, I decided this was the year to mend fences. I packed expensive gifts, boarded a flight to Ohio, and arrived at my parents' house with hope in my heart. The driveway was empty. The house was dark. No decorations. Inside, a single note on the kitchen table read, "Used your money for your brother. Sorry." I didn't cry. I laughed. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear what happened when my parents called me 3 days later, absolutely terrified. Growing up in Riverside, Ohio was what most would call a typical middle-class American childhood, except for one persistent detail that colored everything. My younger brother Cody was the favorite. It wasn't subtle. From as early as I can remember, my parents bent over backwards to accommodate his every need while I was expected to be the responsible one who didn't cause trouble. When I was 12, my parents took the money I'd saved from mowing lawns all summer to buy Cody a new bike after he wrecked his. When I was 16, they drained my car fund to pay for the window Cody broke at a neighbor's house. By 18, I'd learned to hide my money and my achievements. Despite having decent grades and a passion for computer science, my parents never attended my high school graduation. Cody had a baseball game that day. They didn't help with college either. While they co-signed loans for Cody's business administration degree, which he dropped out of after 2 semesters, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state college. I never resented Cody directly. How could I? He was just playing the hand he was dealt, taking advantage of the endless second chances our parents provided. The real issue was with my parents and their inability to see the pattern they'd created. Every time Cody failed, they'd bail him out. Every time I succeeded, they'd barely acknowledge it. After college, I landed a job at a tech startup in Seattle. The distance helped. I built my career, made friends, created a life for myself. I became senior software engineer at a major tech company, earning more than both my parents combined. I rarely mentioned my successes when I called home, knowing they'd somehow be diminished. Still, I maintained contact. Monthly phone calls. Occasional visits. Each time hoping for some recognition, some acknowledgement that I'd done well despite their lack of support. It never came. 2 months ago, everything changed. My grandparents on my mother's side passed away within weeks of each other, leaving me a surprise inheritance of $75,000. They'd always seen the dynamic in our family clearly, and I guess this was their way of making things right. I was touched, and admittedly proud to finally have tangible proof that someone in the family valued me. When my parents found out about the inheritance, they called immediately. For once, they seemed interested in my life. They asked about my job, my apartment, whether I was dating anyone. Then my father cleared his throat and asked if they could hold on to the inheritance money temporarily. Something about better interest rates at their local credit union, and how they'd transfer it back in a few months. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me wanted to believe they'd finally changed, that they finally respected me enough to handle my money responsibly. I transferred the entire amount to their account, telling myself this was a sign of our improving relationship. For the next few weeks, our phone calls were warmer than they'd been in years. My mother actually asked about my projects at work. My father remembered my birthday for the first time in 5 years. I started to believe things were changing. That's why, after 3 years of spending Christmas alone or with friends, I decided to fly home for the holidays this year. I spent hundreds on gifts, a high-end tablet for my mother, who'd recently discovered online gardening forums, an expensive watch for my father to replace the broken one he mentioned, even a new gaming console for Cody, hoping to repair that relationship too. I didn't tell them I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. Imagine the looks on their faces when I showed up at the door with arms full of presents, the $75,000 safely back in my account as promised. All of us finally able to enjoy a Christmas where I wasn't the outsider. The flight to Ohio was filled with nervous anticipation. I kept imagining scenarios of reconciliation, of my parents finally seeing me as the successful adult I'd become. I rehearsed conversations in my head, determined to stay positive and not bring up old wounds. As the Uber approached my childhood home on December 23rd, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread. The house looked the same as always, modest two-story with the same faded blue paint. The maple tree in the front yard now taller than I remembered. But something was off. No Christmas lights. No wreath on the door. No cars in the driveway. I told myself they were probably out shopping for last-minute gifts or groceries. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase and the bag of carefully wrapped presents, and headed up the familiar walkway, the weight of 34 years of complicated family history heavy on my shoulders. The silence was the first thing that struck me. Christmas had always been noisy in our house growing up, with my mother's holiday playlist blaring from the stereo and the TV tuned to whatever bold game my father was following. Even from the porch, I should have heard something. I rang the doorbell twice. Nothing. I knocked. Still nothing. Finally, I remembered the spare key they kept hidden in a fake rock by the garage. Some things never changed. I retrieved it, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. "Hello? Mom? Dad? It's Mason," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty house. The air was cold. They'd turned the heat down, something they only did when leaving for extended periods. I set down my bags and walked through the first floor. The living room was untouched, no Christmas tree. No decorations. The kitchen was clean but abandoned, dishes dried in the rack, coffee maker unplugged. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper on the kitchen table with my name written on the outside in my mother's handwriting. I picked it up, already feeling a sinking sensation in my stomach. The note I initially saw was brief. "Used your money for your brother. Sorry." But there was more inside the folded paper, a longer explanation. "Mason, Cody got in trouble with some gambling debts. We had to use your inheritance to help him out. We know you'll understand since family always comes first. We've gone with him to Atlantic City to sort things out. Back after New Year's. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it 3 times, the words not fully registering. They'd taken my $75,000, all of it, and given it to Cody. They hadn't even had the courage to tell me to my face or over the phone. Just a note. Assuming I'd understand because family comes first. Strangely, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just started laughing. A hollow, empty laugh that bounced off the walls of the kitchen where I'd spent so many holidays watching my parents dote on Cody while I washed dishes. After the laughter subsided, I methodically searched the rest of the house. My parents' bedroom was neat but clearly packed for a trip. In their desk, I found bank statements showing the withdrawal of my entire inheritance 2 weeks earlier. My old bedroom had been converted into a storage room years ago. Boxes of Christmas decorations ironically piled in the corner. Cody's room, however, was preserved like a shrine. His high school football trophies still proudly displayed despite him being 31 years old now. I called my parents' cell phones repeatedly. Straight to voicemail. I called Cody. Same result. I even tried my parents' friends, but no one answered the day before Christmas Eve. Finally, I noticed Mrs. Hendricks, our longtime neighbor, peering curiously through her window. I went outside to talk to her. "Mason! What a surprise to see you," she said, genuinely pleased. She'd always been kind to me growing up. "Hi, Mrs. Hendricks. Do you know where my parents are?" Her smile faltered. "They left 2 days ago with Cody. Your father mentioned something about a family vacation. I assumed you knew." "A family vacation?" I repeated, the irony not lost on me. "Yes, they seemed in quite a hurry. Your brother had a black eye, which was strange. Your father said he walked into a door, but. She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. A black eye. Gambling debts. Atlantic City. The picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't the heartwarming family Christmas I'd imagined. I thanked Mrs. Hendricks and returned to the empty house. Standing in the kitchen, I made a decision. I wouldn't stay here, surrounded by memories and evidence of their betrayal. I called the same Uber driver who dropped me off and asked if he could take me to the nearest decent hotel. As I waited, I took one last look around the house where I'd grown up always feeling second best. Nothing had changed. I was still an afterthought. Still the responsible one expected to understand when my parents chose Cody over me. I locked the door, put the key back in its hiding spot, and sat on the porch with my suitcase and the bag of now useless gifts. The crisp December air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. The numbness had spread from my heart to the rest of my body. When the Uber arrived, the driver looked surprised to see me so soon. "Change of plans?" I said simply, loading my bags into his car. As we pulled away from my childhood home, I didn't look back. The tether that had kept me bound to my parents' approval for 34 years had finally snapped. I felt empty, but beneath that emptiness was something unfamiliar: relief. The Holiday Inn Express on the outskirts of Riverside would be my home for Christmas this year. As I checked in, the cheerful desk clerk wished me happy holidays. I nodded and smiled automatically, already planning my next steps. This betrayal would be the last. I was done being the understanding son who always came second. The hotel room was generic and impersonal, but somehow comforting in its neutrality. No family photos watching me. No childhood memories lurking in corners. Just clean sheets, cable TV, and blessed solitude. I ordered room service, a sad hamburger and fries that cost too much, and tried to process what had happened. The numbness was wearing off, giving way to anger that burned hot in my chest. Not just about the money. Those $75,000 was no small sum. It was about the disrespect, the assumption that I would just accept their decision without question. As I ate, memories flooded back unbidden. When I was 8, my parents missed my school play because Cody had a cold. Not the flu, not pneumonia. A cold. When I was 15, I won a regional science competition. My parents didn't attend because it was the same weekend as Cody's soccer tournament. He didn't even like soccer. He quit 2 weeks later. When I graduated college with honors, they sent a card. They were helping Cody move into his new apartment after he dropped out of community college. Pattern after pattern, moment after moment, when I was told explicitly or implicitly that my achievements, my needs, my very presence was secondary to my brothers. And now, the most egregious example yet, they had stolen my inheritance, left town with my troubled brother, and expected me to accept it with a note that simply said, "Family comes first." I pulled out my laptop and typed out an email to my friend Jake, who happened to be a lawyer in Seattle. I explained the situation as clinically as possible, asking what legal recourse I might have. It was Christmas Eve, so I didn't expect an immediate response, but it felt good to take action. Next, I called my bank and explained that I had been defrauded. The customer service representative was sympathetic but explained that since I had willingly transferred the money, there wasn't much they could do. It would be a civil matter, not a banking one. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, the weight of my naivety crushing me. Of course the bank couldn't help. I had given my parents the money. I had trusted them. My phone rang around midnight. It was Jake, calling instead of emailing. "Mason, I got your email. I'm so sorry this happened. Especially at Christmas," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "Thanks for calling back so quickly. I know it's a holiday." "Of course. Look, I'm not an expert in this kind of law, but I can tell you the basics. Since you willingly transferred the money, this isn't straightforward theft. However, if you can prove they took it under false pretenses, promising to return it when they never intended to. That could be fraud. I have texts where they specifically say they'll hold it temporarily and transfer it back. That's good. Save those. The fact that they left a note admitting they used it for your brother also helps. It's an acknowledgement that they knew the money was yours. We talked for nearly an hour. Jake outlining potential legal approaches and me taking notes. By the end of the call, I had a plan: document everything, file a police report, and prepare for possible civil action against my own parents. Mason, Jake said before hanging up, I know this is hard, but you deserve better than how they've treated you. Don't let them make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. After the call, I spent hours researching online, looking up Ohio laws about fraud and inheritance. I created a detailed timeline of events, saved screenshots of text messages and emails with my parents, and drafted a formal demand letter as Jake had suggested. At some point, I fell asleep on top of the hotel comforter, laptop still open beside me. Christmas morning dawned gray and cold. I woke up disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was and why. Then it all came rushing back: the empty house, the note, my parents somewhere in Atlantic City with my money and my brother. I ordered breakfast from room service and continued working on my documentation. Around noon, I decided to file a police report. The officer at the Riverside Police Department was a woman about my age named Officer Martinez. She listened patiently to my story, typing notes into her computer. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Reynolds, she said when I finished. Since you willingly transferred the money and there's a family relationship involved, the prosecutor might see this as a civil matter rather than criminal fraud. But we'll take your report and investigate. I knew she was right, but filing the report still felt necessary: official documentation of the betrayal. Before leaving the station, I asked if they could do a welfare check on my brother, mentioning the black eye my neighbor had described. We can send someone by the house, but if they're out of town as you mentioned, we won't find anything, Officer Martinez explained. Back at the hotel, I continued my research, discovering that my parents had emptied their personal accounts as well. Their social media had been silent for weeks. It was as if they'd vanished with my money, leaving only a note and decades of emotional baggage behind. That evening, I walked to a nearby diner, the only place open on Christmas Day. The waitress looked at me sympathetically as I sat alone in a booth, picking at turkey and mashed potatoes that tasted nothing like holiday meals should. Rough Christmas? She asked, refilling my coffee. You could say that, I replied, not wanting to burden a stranger with my drama. Well, there's always next year, she said cheerfully. Moving on to the next table. Next year. Would things be different by then? Would I have my money back? Would my parents finally understand the damage they'd done? Or would I be in exactly the same position, still seeking approval from people who would never truly see me? As I walked back to the hotel through the quiet streets of my hometown, Christmas lights twinkling in windows of happy families, I made a promise to myself: regardless of how the legal situation resolved, I would no longer chase my parents' approval. I would no longer accept being second best. I would demand the respect I deserved, or I would walk away for good. That night, in the anonymous comfort of room 214 at the Holiday Inn Express, I slept better than I had in years. The decision had been made for me. The path forward was clear, if difficult. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and hurt, I felt the first stirrings of something new: freedom. 3 days after Christmas, I was preparing to fly back to Seattle. I'd extended my hotel stay, spent hours gathering documentation, and even consulted with a local attorney who specialized in family law. I was resigned to a lengthy legal battle but determined to see it through. Then my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. What could she possibly say to justify what they'd done? But curiosity won out. I needed to hear her explanation. Hello? Mason? Her voice was shaking, barely audible. Mason, thank God you answered. What do you want, Mom? I kept my voice level, refusing to show emotion. We need your help. We're in trouble. Serious trouble. She was crying now, her words coming between sobs. Cody's in deeper than we thought. These people, they're dangerous. They're threatening us. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What people? The men he owes money to. They're not just casino managers, they're loan sharks. They've been following us. They know where we're staying. They said if we don't pay them another $50,000 by tomorrow, they'll. She couldn't finish the sentence. Part of me wanted to hang up. Let them deal with the consequences of their actions for once. But another part, the part that had been programmed since childhood to be the responsible one, needed more information. Let me talk to Dad, I said. My father's voice was unrecognizable, stripped of its usual confidence. Son, I know we've made a terrible mistake. We never should have taken your money. But we're scared. These men followed us from the casino to our hotel. They know our names, where we live back home. One of them hit Cody when he tried to explain we needed more time. The black eye my neighbor had mentioned. So it wasn't a door after all. Where's Cody now? I asked. In the bathroom. He's been throwing up from stress all day. I closed my eyes, fighting back the conflicting emotions warring inside me. Anger at their betrayal. Fear for their safety. Resentment at being put in this position. Again. Mason, please. My mother came back on the line. We need another $50,000. We'll pay back everything, I swear. We can sell the house. We can take out loans. But these men won't wait for that. You stole $75,000 from me, I said, my voice low and controlled. You took my inheritance, money that Grandma and Grandpa left specifically to me. And you gave it to Cody for his gambling debts. You didn't ask me. You didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. You left a note and ran away. We know, and we're so sorry. She sobbed. We thought we were helping him. We thought it would be enough. It's never enough with Cody. That's the problem. You've been bailing him out his entire life. And he's never had to face consequences. And now you want me to do the same thing. This is different. My father interjected. These aren't just consequences. These people are criminals. They threatened to break Cody's legs. They said they know about you, about where you live in Seattle. That gave me pause. Had my parents told these loan sharks about me? Had they already suggested I could provide more money? I was home for Christmas, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I flew to Ohio to surprise you. I brought gifts. I found the house empty except for your note. Silence on the other end. Then my mother's voice, small and shocked. You came home? Yes. Because I thought things were finally changing between us. I thought you finally respected me. More silence. I could hear my father murmuring something to my mother. Mason, we're so sorry. My mother finally said. We didn't know. We never meant to hurt you. But you did. You've been hurting me my entire life by always putting Cody first. And now you're asking me to give you more money after you stole from me? Do you have any idea how that feels? Please, son, my father said, desperation clear in his voice. We'll make it right. We'll pay you back everything. We'll never ask for anything again. But we need help now. I took a deep breath. I've already filed a police report about the stolen money. I've consulted with lawyers. If anything happens to any of you, the police will know exactly where to look. You went to the police? My father sounded betrayed, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. Yes. Because what you did was a crime. It was theft. We're your parents, Mason. That doesn't give you the right to steal from me. Family helps family. My mother pleaded. Family respects family. I countered. Family doesn't steal and lie and manipulate. I could hear them conferring, their voices too low to make out the words. Then my father came back on the line. We understand you're upset. We made a terrible mistake. But please, Mason, we're begging you. Help us this one last time. We'll never ask for anything again. I closed my eyes, knowing I was at a crossroads. Help them and reinforce the toxic pattern that had defined our relationship for decades. Refuse and potentially put them in physical danger. I need to think about this, I said finally. I'll call you back. I hung up before they could protest and sat on the edge of the hotel bed, head in my hands. The familiar weight of family obligation pressed down on me. But now it was competing with new feelings, self-respect, boundaries, the recognition that I deserved better. My phone rang again almost immediately. Cody's name on the screen. I hesitated. Then answered. What? You selfish piece of shit. My brother spat, his voice venomous. You're really going to let Mom and Dad get hurt because you're mad about money? Hello to you too, Cody. How's Atlantic City? Don't be cute. These guys are serious. They've already roughed me up once. You think they won't do worse? I think you got yourself into this mess. And you dragged Mom and Dad into it with you. And now you're trying to drag me in too. It's just money, Mason. You've got plenty. You're doing great in Seattle with your fancy tech job. It's not just money. It's respect. Something you and our parents have never shown me. Cody's voice changed, becoming wheedling, manipulative. Look, I know I've messed up. I've got a problem. Okay? I need help. Real help. If you get us out of this, I swear I'll go to rehab. I'll get my life together. I'd heard this before. The promises, the pledges to change. They never lasted. I've got to go, I said. Mason, wait! These guys know about you. They know where you work, where you live. They said if we don't pay, they'll come after our whole family. That includes you. A chill ran through me. Was this another manipulation tactic, or a genuine threat? I couldn't tell. I'll call you back, I repeated and hung up. I immediately called Officer Martinez at the Riverside Police Department, explaining the new development. She took the threat seriously, documenting everything and advising me to be cautious. Mr. Reynolds, loan sharks and illegal gambling operations are outside our jurisdiction, especially if they're in Atlantic City. You should contact the police there. And possibly the FBI if interstate threats are involved. I followed her advice. Making calls to law enforcement in New Jersey and even speaking with an FBI agent who took my information but seemed doubtful they would get involved at this stage. As night fell on December 28th, I sat in my hotel room weighing my options. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of the whole situation, to let my family face the consequences of their actions for once. But another part, the part that had been raised to be the responsible one, couldn't ignore the potential danger they were in, whether it was their fault or not. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Please call us. We're scared. I stared at the message for a long time before finally making my decision. I would help them, but on my terms. This would be the last time. And there would be conditions. Strict, non-negotiable conditions. I called my father back. Dad, I'll help you. But this is the last time, and you'll do exactly as I say. The relief in his voice was palpable. Anything. Thank you, Mason. Thank you? Don't thank me yet, I said grimly. You're not going to like my terms. As I outlined my conditions, I could hear his relief turning to discomfort, then resistance. But he was in no position to argue. None of them were. For once, I was the one setting the terms. And this time, they would respect my boundaries, or they would face this crisis alone. I was checking out of the hotel the next morning when the desk clerk called out to me. Mr. Reynolds? There are some people asking for you in the lobby. I froze, immediately on alert. Had the loan sharks found me? How would they even know where I was staying? Cautiously, I peered around the corner into the main lobby. The tension in my shoulders released, then immediately reformed into a different kind of stress. It wasn't loan sharks. It was my family. My parents sat huddled on a small sofa, looking haggard and years older than when I'd last seen them. My father's face was ashen, his normally pristine appearance disheveled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed and puffy from crying. And there was Cody, pacing nervously by the decorative Christmas tree that still stood in the corner, sporting a spectacular black eye and split lip. They'd driven straight from Atlantic City, nearly 10 hours overnight. Without calling. Without warning. Just showing up, exactly as they always did. Expecting me to accommodate them. I approached slowly, setting down my suitcase. "What are you doing here?" My mother jumped up, moving to hug me, but I stepped back. Her arms fell limply to her sides. "Mason," she said, her voice breaking. "We had to come. We couldn't wait any longer. I told you I'd wire the money this afternoon." That was the plan we agreed on. My father stood now too, his normally commanding presence diminished. "The men called this morning. They said the deadline had changed. They want the money by noon today, or they're coming to find us." "So you led them straight to me?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "No." My mother looked horrified. "We were careful. We took back roads. We switched cars with your Uncle Jim in Columbus." Cody approached now, his expression a mixture of resentment and desperation. "Look, I know you're pissed at me. You have every right to be. But these guys are serious, Mason. Professional serious. And whose fault is that, Cody? Who racked up $125,000 in gambling debts? Who got our parents involved instead of facing the consequences himself? Who's been taking and taking his entire life without ever giving anything back? That's not fair." My father interjected, his voice finding some of its old authority. "Isn't it? When has Cody ever been held accountable for anything? When have you two ever made him face consequences instead of bailing him out? We're his parents. That's what parents do. You're my parents too," I said quietly. "But you've never done the same for me." An uncomfortable silence fell over the lobby. The desk clerk was pointedly not looking in our direction, but I could tell she was listening to every word. "Maybe we should go somewhere more private," my mother suggested. "Fine. My room. But I'm checking out in an hour whether this is resolved or not." We rode the elevator in tense silence. 4 people connected by blood but separated by decades of resentment and unbalanced treatment. Once inside my room, the confrontation resumed immediately. "I can't believe you went to the police," Cody said, throwing himself into the desk chair. "Do you have any idea how much worse that makes things? I can't believe you stole my inheritance," I countered. "Do you have any idea how much that hurt?" "We didn't steal it," my father insisted. "We borrowed it. We always intended to pay it back." "With what money, Dad?" "You're retired. Cody hasn't held a steady job in years. Where exactly was this repayment going to come from?" He had no answer for that. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Mason, please. We know we've made terrible mistakes. With the money, with how we've treated you. But right now, we need your help. We're scared." I looked at my family, really looked at them. My father, once the pillar of strength in my childhood eyes, now diminished and desperate. My mother, always the peacemaker, trying to smooth over cracks that had become canyons. And Cody, my brother, who had been given every advantage, every second chance, and had squandered them all. "I've already contacted my bank," I said finally. "The money will be available this afternoon, as I promised. $50,000. But my conditions stand." "What conditions?" Cody asked suspiciously. I turned to him, meeting his gaze directly. "You check into rehab. Not just for gambling. For everything. A full program." "I don't need rehab," he scoffed. Then you don't need my money. Mason. My father started, but I cut him off. No. This is non-negotiable. Cody gets help. Real help, or I walk away right now. Fine. Cody muttered. Whatever. And you too. I continued, looking at my parents. You attend family counseling. With me. You acknowledge the favoritism you've shown Cody all these years, and you work to repair the damage it's caused. My father's face darkened. Now wait just a minute. We've always loved you both equally. No, you haven't. And until you can admit that, nothing will change. Your brother needed more support. My mother said defensively. He struggled in ways you didn't. Because you never let him struggle. You never let him fail or face consequences. That's why he's 31 years old and still gambling away money he doesn't have. The truth of my words hung in the air between us. For once, neither of my parents had a ready defense. Suddenly, the hotel room phone rang. We all jumped. I answered cautiously. Mr. Reynolds? It was the front desk clerk. There are some men in the lobby asking for your parents. They seem insistent. Should I call security? My blood ran cold. Yes. And the police. Right now. I hung up and turned to my family. They're here. The loan sharks. They found you. The color drained from my mother's face. My father moved protectively toward her. Cody looked like he might throw up. How did they find us? My mother whispered. They probably followed you. I said, grabbing my phone. Or tracked your cell phones. Did you use credit cards on the way here? My father nodded numbly. Then that's how. I dialed 911. Quickly explaining the situation to the dispatcher. They promised officers would arrive within minutes. What do we do? Cody asked, genuine fear in his voice for perhaps the first time in his life. I looked at my family, huddled and terrified in a hotel room because of choices they had made, consequences they had avoided until they couldn't anymore. And despite everything, despite the hurt and the betrayal, I couldn't abandon them. We go down together, I said. I'll talk to them. I'll show them proof that the money is coming. But after this, things change. Everything changes. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending into the unknown. My parents stood close together, supporting each other as they always had. Cody looked pale and shaken. I stood slightly apart, the division physical as well as emotional. When the doors opened, I saw them immediately. 3 men in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide their dangerous nature. They weren't movie thugs with visible weapons and scars. They were worse, professional, contained, the kind of men who hurt people as a business transaction, nothing personal. The tallest one spotted Cody and smiled, a predatory expression that made my skin crawl. There he is. The Reynolds family reunion. Hotel security stood nervously to one side, clearly out of their depth. The front desk clerk was on the phone, presumably with the police. I stepped forward, physically placing myself between these men and my family. I'm Mason Reynolds, I said, keeping my voice steady. I understand my brother owes you money. The tall man assessed me coolly. He does. A considerable amount. And the deadline has passed. The money is being transferred today. I can show you confirmation from my bank. The man exchanged glances with his companions. That's what they said 3 days ago. And yet here we are. That was them. This is me. I keep my word. Something in my tone must have registered with him. He nodded slightly. Show me. I pulled out my phone, displaying the bank transfer that was scheduled for that afternoon. $50,000. The remainder of what's owed after the $75,000 they've already paid. He examined the screen, then looked up at me with newfound respect. You're bailing them out. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. For the last time. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Family, right? Can't live with them, can't let loan sharks break their legs. Behind me, I heard my mother's muffled sob. "We'll accept the transfer today," the man said. "But if it doesn't arrive, we'll find all of you. Understand?" "It will arrive," I assured him. "And after that, my brother's debt is cleared." "Completely. You don't contact him again. You don't contact any of us." The man studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Business is business. Debt paid, account closed." At that moment, 2 police officers burst through the hotel entrance, hands on their holsters. The 3 men straightened their already immaculate suits. "Just a family discussion, officers," the tall man said smoothly. "No laws being broken here." The officers looked to me for confirmation. "Everything's under control," I said, not taking my eyes off the loan sharks. "These men were just leaving. We have a financial arrangement that will be completed today." The lead officer, clearly sensing the tension but unable to find an actual crime in progress, nodded reluctantly. "We'll be outside if you need us, sir." As the police retreated to the parking lot, the tall man leaned in close to me. 4 o'clock. Not a minute later. He slipped a business card into my pocket. "Send confirmation to this number when it's done." With that, the 3 men departed, leaving my family and me standing in the lobby. The aftermath of years of dysfunction crystallized in one intense confrontation. My father approached me, his hand extended awkwardly. "Thank you, son?" I looked at his hand but didn't take it. "Don't thank me yet. We're not done." 2 days later, we sat in the office of Patricia Winters, a lawyer friend of my Seattle attorney Jake. Her office in downtown Riverside was sleek and intimidating, much like Patricia herself. In her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had agreed to mediate our family's situation as a favor to Jake. My parents sat stiffly on one side of the conference table. Cody slouched beside them, looking resentful but subdued after the hotel confrontation. I sat opposite them, Patricia at the head of the table. Also present was a man named Ray Dixon, a representative from a debt management company I had hired. "Let me make sure I understand this situation correctly," Patricia began, consulting her notes. "Harold and Diane Reynolds, you received $75,000 from your son Mason as a temporary hold, with the explicit agreement you would return it. Instead, you gave that money to your younger son Cody to pay gambling debts. Is that accurate?" My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Yes, but we intended to pay Mason back." "With what funds?" Patricia asked bluntly. My parents exchanged glances. My mother spoke up. "We were going to take a second mortgage on the house, which is already mortgaged to 80% of its value," I pointed out. "I had done my research." Patricia nodded. "And then Cody incurred additional gambling debts of $50,000, which Mason has now paid to protect the family from threats of violence. Correct?" Nods all around the table. "So the total amount owed to Mason Reynolds is $125,000, plus legal fees." Patricia let that sink in. "Mr. Dixon, what options do the Reynolds have for repayment?" Ray Dixon, a heavy-set man with a surprisingly gentle demeanor, opened a folder. "Based on the financial documents you've provided, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds have limited options. Their retirement savings are modest, they have minimal liquid assets, and as Mason noted, their home equity is limited. The most straightforward solution would be to sell the house." My mother gasped. "Our house? But we've lived there for 35 years. You should have thought of that before stealing from me," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Mason." My father started, but Patricia held up a hand. "Let's stay focused on solutions, not accusations." She turned to my parents. "The house is valued at approximately $340,000. You owe about $270,000 on the mortgage. Selling would allow you to repay Mason and have some funds left to secure more modest housing. Like an apartment," Ray added. There are several senior living complexes in Riverside with reasonable rents. My father's face had gone pale. We're not seniors. We're in our early 60s. The point is, Patricia continued, you don't need a 4-bedroom house anymore. Your children are adults with their own lives. Downsizing makes financial sense regardless of this situation. My mother was quietly crying now. And despite everything, I felt a twinge of guilt. This house represented their entire adult lives, the place where they had raised their children, celebrated holidays, built their marriage. There's another option, I said, surprising myself. They could keep the house if they agree to a payment plan. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That would be extremely generous given the circumstances. I don't want to destroy their lives, I explained. I just want accountability. Ray Dixon nodded thoughtfully. A payment plan could work, but it would need to be secured against the house. Essentially a private mortgage. And what about me? Cody asked, speaking up for the first time. Where do I fit into all this? All eyes turned to him. In the 2 days since the hotel confrontation, he had been uncharacteristically quiet, processing the reality that he had nearly gotten our parents hurt, and had effectively bankrupted them. You, I said, go to rehab as agreed. A comprehensive program for gambling addiction. I've already made arrangements at a facility in Cincinnati. They're expecting you next Monday. And after that? He challenged. After that, you get a job. A real job. You contribute to the payment plan since you're the reason we're all sitting here. My father started to object, but my mother placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. It was a small gesture, but significant. For once, she wasn't automatically defending Cody. Your brother is right, she said softly. This can't continue, Cody. We can't keep rescuing you. We don't have anything left to give. The look on Cody's face was complex, shock at her words, anger at being held accountable, but underneath, perhaps a glimmer of relief. The pattern was finally being broken. Fine, he muttered. I'll go to the stupid rehab. Patricia drew up preliminary paperwork for the payment plan. My parents would keep the house but would make monthly payments to me for the next 10 years. The agreement would be legally binding and secured against the property. Cody would contribute a percentage of any income he earned after completing rehab. As we reviewed the documents, my father suddenly pushed back from the table. This is humiliating, he said, his voice tight with emotion. Being treated like irresponsible children by our own son. Dad, I said evenly, you stole my inheritance and gave it to Cody. You lied to me. You betrayed my trust. And then you came to me for more money when the consequences of your actions caught up with you. What would you call that behavior? He had no response. My mother reached for his hand. Harold. We did this. We've been doing this for years, always protecting Cody at Mason's expense. Always expecting Mason to understand, to be the responsible one. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Mason. I don't know if you can ever forgive us, but I am truly, deeply sorry. It was the first genuine apology I had ever received from either of my parents. Not excuses, not justifications, just acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused me. I want to forgive you, I said honestly, but it's going to take time. And changes. Real changes in how we relate to each other. Patricia suggested family therapy as part of our agreement, with regular sessions for at least 6 months. My parents agreed, though my father did so reluctantly. As we were preparing to leave, Ray Dixon pulled me aside. What you're doing is rare, he said quietly. Most people in your position would walk away. Cut ties completely. I've thought about it, I admitted. Part of me still wants to. But you're giving them a chance to make amends. To rebuild. That takes courage. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd seen my decision as weakness. As falling back into old patterns of responsibility. But perhaps there was strength in offering a path to redemption, in demanding accountability while still leaving the door open to reconciliation. We left Patricia's office with signed agreements and a fragile new understanding. My parents would return home to begin the process of adjusting to their new financial reality. Cody would check into rehab the following week. I would fly back to Seattle, my bank account significantly lighter but my boundaries finally established. As we stood in the parking lot, my mother hugged me tentatively. This time, I didn't pull away. "We're going to make this right, Mason," she whispered. "I promise." My father shook my hand, his usual confidence replaced by a newfound humility. "I've not been the father you deserved," he said gruffly. "I hope to do better." Cody hung back, hands shoved in his pockets, still struggling with his new reality. But when I moved to leave, he looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Thanks," he said simply, "for not letting those guys hurt Mom and Dad. And for the rehab thing. I know I need it." It wasn't a full apology or acknowledgement, but from Cody, it was unprecedented. A tiny step toward growth. As I drove away, watching my family grow smaller in the rearview mirror, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: lingering anger, cautious hope, and most surprisingly, a sense of pride. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my family. I had enforced consequences while still offering compassion. It wasn't the Christmas reunion I had imagined when I flew to Ohio with presents and hope. It was messier, more painful, but ultimately more honest. The pretense had been stripped away, the dysfunctional patterns exposed. And from that raw, uncomfortable truth, perhaps something healthier could finally grow. 6 months later, I found myself back in Ohio, this time on a warm June weekend. The neighborhood looked different in summer. The maple trees lush with leaves, flower gardens blooming in front yards. My parents' house, once so central to my concept of home, now held mixed emotions for me. I parked my rental car in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. So much had changed since that disastrous Christmas trip. After returning to Seattle in December, I had thrown myself into work, processing my feelings through marathon coding sessions and long conversations with friends who had always seen the dysfunction in my family more clearly than I could. My phone chimed with a text from my mother. "We see you in the driveway. Come in whenever you're ready. No rush." That was new. My parents respecting my need for space, acknowledging that returning to this house might be difficult for me. Small changes, but significant ones. I grabbed my overnight bag and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my mother, her smile tentative but genuine. "Mason," she said, not moving to hug me immediately as she once would have. "It's so good to see you." "Hi, Mom," I replied, stepping inside. The house looked different. Smaller somehow, with less furniture. "You've redecorated." "We've been downsizing," she explained as we moved into the living room where my father waited. "Selling things we don't need." It's been surprisingly liberating. My father stood as I entered, his posture less commanding than I remembered. "Son," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." We shook hands, the formality feeling appropriate for where our relationship stood. Not estranged, but not pretending everything was normal either. "Where's Cody?" I asked, setting down my bag. "At work," my mother replied, and I couldn't miss the note of pride in her voice. "He got a job at Thompson's Hardware about 2 months ago. Part-time at first, but they just moved him to full-time." This was surprising news. Cody had completed the 90-day rehab program I'd arranged, but I had been skeptical about his commitment to actual change. "He's also attending GA meetings 3 times a week," my father added, referring to Gamblers Anonymous. "Hasn't placed a bet in 5 months." We moved to the kitchen, where my mother had prepared lunch. As we ate, they updated me on the practical matters we had arranged. They had been making their monthly payments to me consistently. They had attended every scheduled family therapy session, even when it was uncomfortable, which was often. Dr. Myers says we've made good progress, my mother ventured. What do you think? I considered the question carefully. I think there's been change. Real change. But we have a long way to go. We understand that, my father said, surprising me with his humility. We've hurt you deeply, over many years. That doesn't get fixed in a few months. After lunch, my father excused himself for his regular afternoon walk, another new habit he'd developed since December. When he was gone, my mother turned to me with serious eyes. I need to tell you something, Mason. Something important. My guard went up automatically, years of disappointment creating instant wariness. It's nothing bad, she reassured me. At least I hope you won't think so. She took a deep breath. I've been seeing my own therapist separate from our family sessions. I needed to understand why I allowed things to get so unhealthy, why I couldn't see what we were doing to you. I waited, unsure where this was going. My therapist helped me recognize that I'd been enabling Cody because he reminds me of my brother, your Uncle Mark. Uncle Mark had died before I was born. I knew little about him except that he had struggled with addiction and died young. Mark was brilliant but troubled. My parents were so hard on him, so unforgiving of his mistakes. When he died, I promised myself I would never be that way with my children. Her eyes filled with tears. But in trying to not repeat my parents' mistakes with Cody, I made different mistakes with you. I expected too much. I took your strength for granted. It was a level of self-awareness I had never witnessed in my mother. The revelation didn't erase the hurt of decades, but it helped me understand her motivations beyond simple favoritism. Thank you for telling me that, I said quietly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so proud of you, Mason. Not just for your success, but for your courage in standing up to us. For demanding better from your family. Later that afternoon, Cody arrived home from work. His usual swagger replaced by a more subdued demeanor. He looked healthier than I had seen him in years, clear-eyed and fit. Hey, he said, nodding to me. Didn't know if you'd actually come. I said I would. An awkward silence fell between us, decades of rivalry and resentment not easily dispelled. Look, he finally said. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. How to be better. It's not easy. I know it's not, I acknowledged. The counselors at rehab made me see how I'd been using Mom and Dad as a safety net my whole life. How unfair that was to them. And to you. He struggled visibly with the words. I'm sorry, Mason. For taking your money. For all of it. The apology was imperfect, still centered partly on himself, but it was genuine. And from Cody, it was unprecedented. I appreciate that, I said. Really. That evening, we shared a simple dinner, the four of us together for the first time since the crisis at Christmas. The conversation was sometimes stilted, sometimes surprisingly comfortable. We were finding our way toward a new dynamic, one built on honesty rather than pretense. After dinner, as my parents cleaned up, Cody handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. First payment, he said. From my paychecks. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was $300 cash. A small sum compared to what had been taken from me, but symbolically significant. Thanks, I said, pocketing the envelope. This matters. He nodded, understanding. The next day, before leaving to catch my flight back to Seattle, I sat with my parents in their backyard. The payment plan was working, but it was clear that maintaining the house was a financial strain for them. Have you thought more about downsizing? I asked carefully. Moving to something smaller? My father sighed. We've been discussing it. This place is too big for just us. And the maintenance is becoming difficult. There's a nice condo development near the park. My mother added. Single level, less upkeep. We've looked at a unit there. What's stopping you? I asked. They exchanged glances. Memories, I suppose, my father admitted. And pride. I nodded, understanding. The memories go with you. And there's pride in making smart decisions, too. We'll likely list the house this fall, my mother said, after we've had one last summer here. As I prepared to leave, my mother hugged me, this time without hesitation. Will you come back for Christmas? She asked. We'd love to have you, but we understand if it's too soon. I thought about it honestly. I'm not sure yet. Let me think about it. Of course, she said, and I could see the effort it took for her not to press, not to guilt me into committing. Another small but significant change. My father shook my hand, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief, awkward hug. I'm proud of you, son, he said gruffly. I should have said that more often over the years. On the flight back to Seattle, I reflected on the visit. The changes in my family were real, if still evolving. My parents were making efforts to understand their enabling behaviors and to treat me with new respect. Cody was sober, working, and showing signs of maturity I had never seen in him before. And I was different too. Stronger in my boundaries, more confident in my worth. Less desperate for validation from people who had been unable to provide it. Back in my Seattle apartment, I opened my laptop to find an email from a woman named Claire, whom I had been dating for a few months. She was kind, independent, and refreshingly straightforward. She had no tolerance for family drama or manipulation, having escaped her own toxic family situation years earlier. How was the visit home? She had written. Still on for dinner tomorrow? I want to hear all about it. I smiled as I typed my reply, telling her I was looking forward to sharing the experience with someone who would understand both the progress and the ongoing challenges. The inheritance that had been taken from me, the $75,000 from my grandparents, had cost me much more financially when factoring in the additional $50,000 I had paid to protect my family from loan sharks. But in a strange way, it had been worth it. It had forced a confrontation that was decades overdue. It had shattered unhealthy patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. My family was healing, slowly and imperfectly. I was healing too, discovering what it meant to be valued and respected by the people who should have done so all along. As I looked out my window at the Seattle skyline, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The money would eventually be repaid. The deeper wounds would take longer to heal. But for the first time, I believed that healing was possible, that my family could become something healthier than it had ever been. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money at all, but the courage to break destructive patterns and the wisdom to build something better in their place. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you balance holding them accountable while still maintaining a relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and learning to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others is to stop enabling harmful behaviors.